We have been told our entire working lives to touch your Roth last. Let it grow tax-free as long as possible. Drain the taxable accounts first, then the 401k. Then, only then, decades from now, crack open the Roth. You followed that rule because it feels obvious, responsible, the kind of thing a smart person does. And I'm about to tell you that this single, well-intentioned sequence is dismantling your retirement income, year by invisible year. Not in a crash, not in a scandal, in the way water erodes a foundation, slowly, silently, and irreversibly if you don't stop it early. That's not a metaphor. I watched it happen in my own accounts. And what I discovered, the specific mechanism that turns a sensible withdrawal order into an income-destroying machine, is something almost no pre-retirement checklist mentions. By the end of this video, you'll not only see the mistake, you'll understand exactly how to reverse it. And if you stay with me until the end, I'll show you the hidden annual trigger that amplifies this error into something far larger than a tax bill. First, I need to say what I always say. I'm not a financial advisor. I'm not a tax professional. I'm someone who made this exact mistake, felt the consequences in my own monthly budget, and then spent a year untangling the logic with people far smarter than me. What follows is what I wish someone had handed me the week before my first withdrawal. Let me take you back to the summer I turned 61. I had what I thought was a solid plan. A rollover IRA from an old employer, a modest Roth I'd funded sporadically, and a taxable brokerage account holding some inherited stock. I'd read the standard advice: spend taxable first, then tax-deferred, then Roth. And I nodded along because it made intuitive sense. Why pay taxes now when you can defer them? Why interrupt the magical compounding inside the Roth? So in June, I started pulling from the taxable account. It felt painless. Capital gains rates were lower than income rates. By October, that account was thin. I turned to the IRA. A few months later, I got my first full-year Medicare adjustment letter. My premiums had jumped. My marginal tax rate had crept into a bracket I didn't know I was near. And when I added up what those extra costs would look like over a 25-year retirement, I felt something I hadn't felt since my 20s. The cold recognition that a rule I trusted without questioning had cost me real, permanent income. Here's the number. Between the higher Medicare premiums, the bump in my tax bracket, and the lost opportunity to manage future required distributions, I calculated that my decision to leave the Roth alone was going to cost me roughly $3,600 a year. Every year. For the rest of my life. That's not a one-time penalty. That's a permanent reduction in my monthly spending floor, all because I followed an order that felt safe. That moment rewired how I think about withdrawals entirely. And the counterintuitive truth I landed on, the thing I now check before any distribution, is this. The goal of withdrawal sequencing is not to defer taxes as long as possible. It's to keep your taxable income as smooth and as low as possible across every remaining year of your life. Deferring taxes is a tactic. Income smoothing is the strategy. And when you confuse the two, you end up with years where your tax bill spikes, your Social Security becomes taxable, and your Medicare premiums get surcharged, all because you did the right thing. That's the system flip. And once you see it, the six-figure difference between the conventional order and a deliberately smoothed order becomes impossible to ignore. So let's walk through the mistake in slow motion, because understanding the anatomy is what gives you the power to avoid it. The conventional sequence, taxable, then tax-deferred, then Roth, creates a dangerous shape on your tax return. In the early years, you're living off accounts with lower tax impacts. You feel rich. Your reported income is modest. You feel like you've cracked the code. But then, usually around the time you hit your 70s, several things converge at once. The taxable accounts are depleted. You're now drawing exclusively from your IRA or 401k, where every dollar is ordinary income. If you delayed Social Security until 70, those checks are now at their maximum, also taxable income. And looming on the horizon are required minimum distributions, which force you to withdraw and report even more income, whether you need it or not. What happens in that transition is a tax cliff. Your income can jump enough to push you into a higher bracket, trigger the taxation of your Social Security benefits, and cross the IRMAA thresholds, those Medicare surcharges that kick in at specific income levels. The damage isn't just the extra tax you pay, it's that your effective spending power shrinks permanently because a larger slice of every future withdrawal now goes to the IRS. The conventional order didn't avoid taxes. It just backloaded them into a concentrated period where they sting harder and compound against you.
The alternative, the income smoothing approach, is less intuitive but mathematically stronger. Instead of draining accounts in a fixed sequence, you blend withdrawals each year to keep your taxable income within a target range. That might mean pulling some from the IRA and some from the Roth in the same year, even though it feels wrong to touch the Roth early. It might mean realizing capital gains in the brokerage account in some years and not others. The aim isn't to minimize taxes in any given year. It's to prevent any single year from becoming a tax disaster that triggers a cascade of surcharges and lost deductions. Here's why this matters in dollars, not theory. Imagine you're 67, newly retired, with $500,000 in an IRA, $150,000 in a Roth, and $50,000 in a taxable account. Under the conventional plan, you'd burn through the $50,000 first, paying minimal taxes. You feel great. Then you hit the IRA. For several years, you're withdrawing $30,000 or $40,000, staying in a low bracket. But by 73, when RMDs begin, you've still got a large IRA balance. The RMD alone might be $20,000, piled on top of Social Security. You're suddenly in a bracket where every additional dollar is taxed at 22 or 24%. Plus, your Medicare premium jumps by $70 or $80 a month. And you have no Roth left to cushion the gap because you saved it all until the end.
Now imagine instead that starting at 67, you withdrew $25,000 from the IRA and $10,000 from the Roth each year, deliberately filling up the lower tax brackets. You pay a little more tax in your late 60s, yes, but your IRA balance shrinks, which reduces future RMDs. You never cross the IRMAA threshold. Your Social Security remains less taxed. And by the time you're 75, your required distributions are manageable. And you've still got a pool of tax-free Roth money to handle big expenses without triggering a taxable event. Over 20 years, that second strategy can preserve tens of thousands of dollars in after-tax spending power. Not because you earned a higher return, but because you stopped fighting the wrong war. This is where most advice stops. They'll tell you to consider blending withdrawals and leave it at that. But there's an additional layer to this mistake that almost nobody addresses, and it's the one that genuinely surprised me. The hidden trigger that turns a tax bump into a multi-year sentence.
It's called IRMAA, the Income-Related Monthly Adjustment Amount, and it functions like a silent income tax multiplier. Your Medicare Part B and Part D premiums are based on your modified adjusted gross income from 2 years prior. So the income spike you create at 72 from RMDs doesn't just raise your tax bill. It raises your healthcare premiums at 74, and then again at 75 if the spike continues. But here's the devious part. By the time you receive the premium surcharge notice, the income year that caused it is long past. You can't undo it. You're locked into paying higher premiums for the entire year, and in some cases, for the following year too. It's a retroactive penalty you didn't see coming, triggered by a withdrawal decision you made 2 years earlier. That's the quiet engine behind the thousands per year I mentioned earlier. Not a tax bill you can see on your return, A health insurance surcharge that arrives in the mail, like a delayed bill for a purchase you forgot you made. The fix, again, is smoothing. By planning withdrawals to stay just under the IRMAA thresholds, which are published income tiers, you can avoid triggering the surcharge entirely, or at least push it further into the future when your overall expenses may be lower. This isn't about being cheap. It's about recognizing that the cost of a single withdrawal mistake compounds across multiple systems, tax brackets, benefit taxation, and healthcare premiums. And the conventional taxable first order walks you straight into the crossfire.
So what's the actionable step you can take this week? Gather the current IRMAA income thresholds. They're public. Write down your expected Social Security income, any pension, and the approximate RMD you'll face based on your current IRA balance. Then, with a tax-savvy person or software, sketch out 2 scenarios, one with the conventional sequence and one where you intentionally blend withdrawals to stay in the 12% bracket and below the IRMAA triggering point. Look at the 10-year difference. That's not an academic exercise. That's the most important retirement math you'll do before you take your next distribution. I'll ask you something I really want to know, and I hope you'll share it. What's a piece of standard retirement advice you followed, maybe for years, that later turned out to have a hidden cost? You'll be saving someone, and it doesn't need to be about withdrawals. It could be about anything. That's the point.
Now, if this video shook loose the idea that tax smart sometimes means doing the opposite of what you've been told, the next one is going to feel almost subversive. Because there is a completely legal way to pay $0 in federal taxes during retirement. Not a loophole for the ultra-wealthy, not a scam. An accessible structure you can set up before you need it. One that makes the IRS code work for you, instead of against you. Most people hear zero taxes and assume it's a fantasy. I thought the same. Then I saw the numbers. I'll lay out the whole thing next. Simple, clean, and something you can start mapping this week.